Everyone's waiting for the NFL draft. I've already drafted 5 teams, and drafting this early shows you what actually matters. I've drafted 5 teams so far. Last year around this time, I had about 10, and we're going in with another level this year. So we got about, a week left until the NFL draft. So realistically, I could always squeeze in another draft. However, these are about to be the 5 main drafts that I'm going in with before the NFL ever even drafted rookies. So we're just going to go through these teams that I've drafted so far while I just kind of break down the thoughts that are going through how I'm drafting these teams as I am. So this first team we see here, the quarterback room is Justin Herbert and Tyler Shuck. I definitely have Shuck on an up. I'm a Shuck Dynasty owner, so take that with whatever bias you'd like. And looking over last year's quarterback performances, Herbert was one of the most consistent that you can get in that next tier of QBs. I also have Brock Purdy this year a lot above consensus. And realistically, not all of these quarterbacks that are lower in consensus are going to finish up top. However, Herbert, Purdy, Shuck as your backup, Stafford as backup for guys that are, when you have your Josh Allen, right? You take your Josh Allen, so when he gets the 30 plus points, you soar. And when he gets the 3-point games, Stafford comes in with 24, Those are the kind of things I'm thinking about building my quarterback rooms this year. Having somebody who puts up at least one 30-plus game with generally consistent mid-20s, and that second one who's going to do about the same, especially for bye weeks and whatever else. So moving into the RB room on this team, it's definitely shallow. RBs definitely get shy quick. And I'm taking note of it. And some of these teams, I had a couple more RBs. However, it's definitely been something I've been running into for a lot of the season. Now, we're going to find out how that turns out for us, because as we'll get to, that's why our receivers are so killer. And guys like Charbonnet make it feel like I can, but especially before the NFL draft, not knowing if Seahawks are going to bring anyone else in, or if Charbonnet is going to be our Javonte Williams of last year and or our J.K. Dobbins of 2 years ago. That's kind of the idea. So our RBs, I've got Chase Brown as the leader. And when he was playing the second half of the season and with Joe Burr, that bro doesn't put up single-digit points. He'll be a PPR killer, and this is half PPR. So it's good to take into account. However, Chase Brown is our RB1. DeAndre Swift on an improving Chicago offense, who, when he's your RB2, he's putting up double-digit points majority of the weeks. Those are our main 2 RBs for the season. And then Charbonnet, who we're getting down there at pick 140, who, when he's RB1, puts up 26-point games. I like that with the 3 of them. And then it's just Justice Hill. It's Justiny. And he's just our 4th one. Whether or not he actually has any explosive games, Keaton Mitchell's out of town. And Derrick Henry is continuing to be the king of the league, showing longevity, while also getting 1 year older. So keep pairing them together. That's the RB room. Again, it may come out a little shy. So let's hear what the rest of the team can be. Getting into our wide receivers, starting with Puka. Obviously, we love that. You're never going to actually know which of the first round wide receivers are the ones. And we know that if Puka stays healthy and Stafford stays healthy, he's going to keep on his dominance. I think he was wide receiver 1 last year. So him. Then Olave, who I think was wide receiver 6. Again, when I think about Olave, I have him better in a PPR league, especially with Shuck. However, Chris Olave is somebody who people had been drafting in the 3rd round just because of his talent. And now he's finally proved he's worthy of that draft capital. So we then got JMO, who's continuing on the up, only more and more explosive. He's our wide receiver 3 on this team. And Marvin Harrison. So Marvin Harrison is one I'm about to make a video on as to who actually benefits more from the Kyler trade, Marv or Jettas. Y'all let us know down below what you think as of now. However, my consciousness is saying Marv. I'm going to dive into some research, make it a video to actually break it down. But just as of now, I've been taking a good amount of Marv. I like him and Rome, both in similar spots. And then our wide receiver 5 on this team is Chris Godwin. This is another one who I'm never sure who I actually think is going to produce more, Chris Godwin or Agbuka. Mike Evans is out of town. Chris Godwin was wide receiver 1 or 2 before his ankle turned backwards. And so it was a slow comeback the next year after that injury, and now it's year 2. So are we saying Chris Godwin, with the leaving of Mike Evans, comes back into that main role, slot role? Who do we take earlier, Godwin or Egbuka? I know Egbuka is coming into his role. Year 2, I definitely am taking a lot of him. However, I see Godwin too. So let us know what you think in regards to that. But those are our top 5 receivers. And then we definitely are still going receiver heavy. In this case, where you're still seeing a Michael Pittman, who I don't draft a lot, it just kind of feels like, yeah, you might get a couple points here and there when you sprinkle it in properly. A Shakir, who even though DJ Moore is there, still is probably going to have more of your 8 to 11 point games, which could fill in here and there. Trey Harris, who we got stacked to Herb and is more of a shot play based off what they've got over there. And then just 3 New England receivers. We got Booty Cheeks, Mac Hollins, who I've been drafting in the last round of the last 2 years, and Pop Douglas. Similarly, I've been drafting in late rounds for both my years of fantasy going into this 3rd one. So that's the receiver room, which is pure dominance. Does the QB room, which I think it does, and the RB room have enough to keep up with it? That's what we're here to learn, bro. Like, at the end of the day, we stupid. Like, don't take any of our advice. Like, this is all just for my own journey, winning $100,000 through fantasy football. So, to finish off this team, and we'll keep on looking at the rest of them, the tight end room is something I've been experimenting with a little more this year. Like last year, I had a lot of just take Brock and whoever else and Likely, and it didn't work out great. And I'm definitely understanding when I looked through our tight end rankings and guys like Juwan Johnson, guys like Dallas Goedert, at least last year, those are the guys who are putting up your double-digit points every week. Even when a Hunter Henry, like we had been talking about, finishes as a tight end 1, top 12 tight end, he still has a lot of 3-point games. It's just about those, spike games he gets. So when you have your tight end room, you got to build it around what players are those consistent bases, what players are the occasional explosions. And with this tight end room, we have Dalton Kincaid, which I'm not a huge fan of in terms of season to season. However, we know as he continues to adapt more into the league, realistically, he should only have more games where the reason he's being drafted earlier than those other tight ends is just because he explodes 1 or 2, maybe 3 times. When you pair that with a Juwan Johnson, who again, I have on the up, I have Shuck on the up, Saints as a whole, I have on the up, that should get you most of your consistent tight end points to just keep you chugging with the rest of the league. When your main things like your receivers are actually soaring you to the top. Now, finishing off the tight end room, when we talk about guys like AJ Barner, it's not for any reason like they're going to carry your tight ends. It's simply because all the money is won in a couple specific weeks. You don't win any money throughout the regular weeks of the season. You only advance to have the opportunity to. Week 15, you don't win much money. You just advance to the next round. You maybe win your money back. By the time you're actually winning money, it comes in those week 16 and week 17 games. And Barner, he may have done that last year already and it's out of his system. But the reality is when you take shots on guys who just are going to be the money winning players, like Barner can easily be the guy who puts up 25 week 16 and 17 and all the teams that had him win the biggest money. And so it's not that that's going to be Barner. It's that Barner's one of the guys to fill in that can take that role. So we're going to be playing around with things like that. Definitely have Barner as a good tight end from what I just got to see last year. So that's the first team we're going to look over. If you have any thoughts in regards to, RBs are too weak, got to be getting more depth earlier on, let us know. Team 1 from pick 5, what do we got to adjust? Team 2, and these are in inverse order from most recent to least. So, like I had talked about with my QBs, I got Purdy over consensus. Mahomes, I was thinking I had over consensus, and now I'm in a little bit of a, just what do we think? Don't actually build so much attachment to, Mahomes all the time. Like the reality is, I do think that ACL injuries are less impactful year one for quarterbacks. However, we talk about the year twos after ACL injuries, right? Patrick Mahomes' ACL was injured late into the season. So it's a handful of things that make sense as to why he's being drafted down there at QB12, even after his performance he had. So I'm sprinkling him in. You know, you can get him at a good value. I took both of these quarterbacks, it seems like, with back-to-back picks. And again, just let us know what we're actually thinking on Mahomes. Is Mahomes like Brady coming back from his ACL injury and being a top 5 fantasy QB? Right? Or do we think, he's going to be slower. He's not going to move the same. Stay away. Only draft him when he falls to us. What do we actually think in regards to that? Let us know. Moving to the RBs, we got Christian McCaffrey, which, like, we not fucking around. Even if he is 29, maybe turning 30, like, it's about these prime athletes. Okay? CMC might be at the end of his time, but he's still one of the next evolutions of these fucking athletes, bro. Like, he'll continue to show dominance, not as long as D-Hen, but to a higher elite after most people would expect. Like, people talk about the year 28 fall off. That's good for your normal RBs. Your year 29s are your Aaron Jones and your higher level RBs. Your fucking super elites like CMCs, they be good till 32, bro. Especially when you know what CMC's been doing for his body his entire career. So he's our hero on this team. And during this draft, this was our live draft. We took Travion at pick 54. He's making it to us. It's, I think, our round 5 pick. And it's like, yeah. Like, when you got Travion, who's coming into, filling his role a little bit more, and even with the amount of games he had under single digits, he has a couple of 30s. Hey, if you fill in the room, then those 30s are going to soar you. And the games where he's in single digits, you got to have the rest of the guys. Now, that was what I said going in when I drafted Travion, and RBs got shy again, right? We ended up with Pollard. I mean, he could easily get somebody drafted over him. We'll see exactly what happens there. He could get 8 to 12 points throughout some games, especially if he does stay as the one and him and Cam Ward start to improve a little bit. Then Charbonnet, like we've been talking about, feels like the great value out there. Drafted him a little early, knowing he should just be drafted above all these Tony Pollards. And then Pacheco, I just get to enjoy it as a Lions fan, and because it's the Pacheco running style, which is what I preach with our athletes. And it's just like, yeah, even if Gibbs is going to dominate, Pacheco doesn't got to do much. He'll get some goal line touches and he'll have some explosion plays. And then we take Jordan James as our last RB. This is probably the only one with 6, just in pairing with CMC. So, let us know what we think about the RB room. I think it can be solid. We might have been too shy on depth. And we'll move over to the receivers, which are maybe one tier less than that last team we looked at. Now, it starts with George Pickens. I definitely know him being whatever, wide receiver, like 5 last year. CD was out a good amount. Whatever else, like, GP will be solid, but is he worth the capital? I got him at pick 30, so I'd say it makes sense there. However, what do we actually think in regards to George Pickens this year? And then we take J-Mo, wide receiver 2. Again, we got our Lions bias in there, but I love having J-Mo, especially when I also like having Marv right now. I just think Marv produced a lot more with Jacoby Brissett than he did with Kyler Murray, which is also why I think Jettas will produce more with Kyler than with JJ as well. But I still think that Kyler is closer to a terrorist for his wide receivers than he is a boost to his team. That's why I think Marv has more points when he plays with Brissett. So our 4th receiver on the team is Xavier Worthy. 2.5 years for mastery. It's another thing we preach. It's year 3 that we're entering. So, Worthy should only be getting more and more slings, entering more and more of the career path of the Tyreek Hill, right? If you look at Tyreek Hill's career path, he came in as more of just a speed demon and less of a technical producer. And he was just a return man for his first 2-3 years, started producing. And then it turned into, like, by year 3 through 7 is when he only started getting more and more dominance on the field. So let's start seeing the same thing with Worthy, who's been producing his entire career. So our 5th receiver on the team, we got Denzel Boston. Again, we're drafting fantasy teams before the NFL's drafted rookies. So we're just taking shots. Where does Denzel Boston go? whether it's to a team where they've already got 3 wide receivers and he's nothing, or it's to an opportunity where he gets to be a wide receiver 2, maybe even 1. Like that's the range of outcomes you're taking when he's your wide receiver 5. We'll see what that turns into, drafts in a week. So we'll pay attention. I mean, I haven't done much college research on these players yet at all, So I really just like looking at how did players produce, because normally production is going to be the better correlator when you take the next skill gap to also producing after you've adapted to that like new level. So we'll see. I'll look into how did Denzel Boston produce. If anyone knows a little on him, you can let me know down below. But I'll get into that. And then we just took the Raiders wide receivers. Now, the Raiders receiver 1 is Brock. We're going to have Mendoza slinging the rock. We're going to have Genty in the backfield. Now, their wide receivers, they're left to Trey Tucker and Speedy Naylor. Shout out Sparty. Go green. I think having the 2 of them, you're going to get solid correlated points. You got the wide receiver 1 for a team, and they can bounce back and forth if they have both shitty games because they're your wide receiver 6 and 7, or if they both have solid games throughout the season, they get to fill a role for you. So we got 1 more wide receiver on the team, Zachariah Branch. Again, I don't really know much about the kid at all. However, you just take those shots. You just pick and choose, feel things out. And then we just finished with Keon, who it's year 3, same thing, 2.5 years for mastery. It seems like he's getting more phased out of the receiving room than anything. However, it's my second to last pick. And then Jahan Dotson, who is currently the wide receiver 2 for Atlanta. So that was our last pick of the team. And then this was the team that we live streamed. So some of y'all might have seen the clip of us accidentally drafting Brock over McBride. So that's what our tight end room ends up with here. Brock, who I have as the tight end 2. He hasn't put up a 300-point season yet. McBride seems like he's only going to keep doing it with Jacoby Brissett. 20-point games every fucking week. So I have McBride finishing over 300 points and Brock maybe 280. The difference is they're just different tight end styles. McBride, you're going to get your 20 points every week. Brock, you're going to get your 40-point bombs and your couple of 4s. And so if you build your tight end room around what you're drafting, right? If you draft Trey McBride, you're pretty much good wherever you go. If you draft Brock, your second tight end isn't as good being a Hunter Henry. It's a lot better being a Jawan Johnson or a Dallas Goedert that you believe in to stay consistent all season. Because then when Brock has the games that don't put up, well, you got it covered. And when he does, again, there's your soaring. And bro, like, it's a Brock year, The magic's in for the kid. So moving into the third team, again, we got 5 teams to just look over, see what we've been thinking going into the drafts. This is another Patrick Mahomes team. And this was earlier as I was drafting, where you're going to see the next team something similar to me taking all these late injured QBs. So these QBs who were producing early in the season, being top 5 QBs, Mahomes and Daniel Jones, they both end up with an ACL and an Achilles in the later half of the season. So I've been phasing out of drafting them like I was here as my first few drafts. What do we think actually happens with it? We're going to find out. I mean, does Daniel Jones and does Mahomes, either of them, let alone both, start the season? What do you think? I'd say Mahomes starts the season. I feel like Daniel Jones does too, but it can always be different. And I'd say Daniel Jones, he may be more impacted by this Achilles injury than I would think Mahomes, the GOAT, is by the ACL. So I definitely haven't drafted Daniel Jones, for example, since this draft. So what do we actually think when it comes to that? Again, my RB room, I be playing somewhat of a similar strategy, which I'm finding comes out shy frequently. Now, James Cook, we're finally taking, as a first round pick. It's been the last few years that he's been a top 10 RB and still being allowed to draft in round 4, right? So we're taking him with our first pick. And then the rest of the RB room has Swift, which we talked about. Jaylen Warren, who's now accompanied by Rico Dowdle. And we're going to find out what we think there. Does Rico Dowdle take over the roles? Does Jaylen Warren finally step into the 1? What exactly do we see there? Woody Marks, he's now the 2 that might have some explosion behind Demo. However, he's probably going to be a little less. And Trey Benson, it sounds like is the 3 right now. with Algier, as they're talking as the 1 in Carolina. James Conner, who's past his year 28, 29 fall off, so whatever happens with that, but he's still dominant when he's healthy. And then Trey Benson. So whether he puts up anything or not, we're going to find out. That's the last RB. You know, this one is definitely, I feel like all season, I feel like I only keep getting better with my drafts. So we're also doing daily mocks throughout April. You can keep on the Instagram stories just to see how our mocks are turning out, what guys we're liking, and what strategies we're taking. And that's why I think our drafts are only getting better all season. So, I mean, even when we look at this receiving room, we got Neighbors 1, which he may start out slow, but that boy is a different species. So he'll be your dominant later into the season, and he'll still be solid as he's healthy. We know it's not the year 1 things, but he had his injury early, right? So it's more like year 1.5, halfway through, you're going to have a push if the rest of your team could keep up. And we may not be there. We'll find out, you know? At the end of the day, it is just whatever Destiny has in store is going to just simply be already written and play out. So Neighbors is our wide receiver 1. Rashi's our 2, who I'm a big fan of. Getting Rashi when he always puts up fucking 16 to 20 plus point games with Mahomes feels like a steal. If you do think Mahomes is going to underproduce, well, maybe it's not as good. However, especially on this correlated team with Mahomes QB1, Rashi wide receiver 2, I think it's dominance. So again, we know the power of building these wide receiver rooms because you got to play 3 every week when you have a flex 4. So we get to finish out the room with Zay, who's going to keep being what he's being. You know, he'll be a solid wide receiver 3, occasional flex, occasionally you have to produce better, whatever. Alec Pierce, another big shot guy, right? He's not necessarily going to have your 10-point games every week. And he's our wide receiver 4 here. However, he might have a couple 40-point games, more like high 20s and 30s. So you can have that filled in. It's our wide receiver 4, and then we got the double stack with Worthy. So we got Mahomes, we got Rashi, we got Worthy, and we already talked about Worthy, bro. Again, I'm a dynasty owner of Worthy, drafted him at pick 6 his rookie year. So take the bias with a grain of salt. However, it's 2.5 years for mastery, entering year 3. So keep the correlation, give us them all, get the explosion. I mean, we might have games where some receivers aren't putting us up points. However, we could easily have a few weeks where we get Alec Pierce, fucking Worthy, Neighbors, Zay, super bombs, you know? So then the rookie we talked about, of the 5 rookie names you must know now, KC Conception, you know, just sprinkle him in. Again, we'll find out where he goes and what his situation even looks like. And then we got 2 Denver receivers, Pat Bryant and Marvin Mims. They got 2 above them, Sutton and Waddle. So we'll see what that has, but it could be an explosion here or there. And Tez Johnson, who we definitely enjoy being the wide receiver 3/4 behind Jalen McMillan, being able to explode a week or 2. Again, you'll see us frequently finishing with a Pop Douglas and things like that. But, I mean, the receiver room might not be as strong as, like, my most recent team. However, I still love having these correlations and these plays in here. I feel like it's great for just the team diversity. And when we're taking teams into the advancement, it's not about having all the same fucking teams. Last year we had, like, Amon-Ra, D-Hen, etc. on all our advancement teams. Let's have some sprinkled in shit so we can send different teams to these biggest money winning rounds. I haven't sent a team to the final round yet. So, you know, of these, we're making it inevitable that our first teams make it to the final round this year. So to finish off this team, you're going to see another Jawan when I'm waiting on it, just to keep it basic. I took him 23 picks above ADP. Hunter Henry, who will have his 3-point games and his high 20s. And Theo Johnson. I like Theo Johnson as an athlete. I like him in his team situation. It's correlated to Neighbors. However, with Harbaugh bringing in Likely, we're going to see what that turns into. I'm not going to be drafting too much of either. Kind of just both when they fall into our hands. So that's the 3rd team. And just 2 more teams to look at that we've drafted so far before the NFL draft. And really just doing all this to wrap my own brain around how I'm drafting, what I'm going into drafting, the things I've learned from the last 2 years playing best ball, and then what I'm learning as I go throughout year 3. So this team, we have Baker, Daniel Jones. When I did the live drafts, I went through looking at all our QBs, and Baker did not make my cut. That's when guys like Purdy and Herbert really moved up in our consensus, because I've always been a regular fantasy player, which is always about season production, because you're not going to pick what week to start this guy or that guy, right? That's the difference. You got to have your guys who are your consistent point getters, and they're going to just keep you flowing. Best ball, it's not about season production. It's about week-to-week production. Baker isn't having over 30-point games, isn't having a ton of, just 20s. Like, with the guys he's being drafted around, you're better with your Purdy. You may be better with your shot, Mahomes or Baker. Like, y'all let us know, who are we drafting in best ball, and then whether or not it's different in your regular fantasy leagues, Mahomes or Baker. I got my choice for both now. But these are just the things going into it. Again, having not all the same players and mixing it around is best for me personally to begin with. So this is our second DJ team. Again, we kind of got the same thoughts on that. I know can be productive, and I know he had the late Achilles injury, which is low-key just once putting the attention to that, keeping me more away from it than towards it. So when he makes it to me, I'm taking him, sure. However, I'm often getting other guys in that range. In our RB room here, again, this continues on the whole shy thing, because we got Devon Achane as the hero, who supposedly I'm hearing isn't at camp right now, and we know that their team, they're doing what they can to bring in Jerry, bro. Like Jeremiah to the Dolphins, because they just brought Malik Willis and got rid of all their receivers. So yeah, Devon will still eat. However, we'll see exactly what goes on with Miami. So the rest of our RBs, Rico Dowdle's second. Does he even really produce? We're going to find out. I wasn't huge on him, and then he came out and just dominated a couple of weeks in Carolina. So I would say he may have the build and the dog in him. Do I think he takes over? Not necessarily. So we'll see. It's more teaching me the value of filling the rooms out for the RBs rather than being in those potentially lost territories, where you see us take another Tony Pollard, which we've already elaborated on, and another Charbonnet, which I think is potentially the RB2 on this team if Seattle doesn't draft anybody or bring anybody else in. And then we just take a shot on a Nicholas Singleton, a rookie who I've been liking for a few years. And so, you're never going to know situationally what happens. That's just the point of these fantasy teams that you can draft before the NFL draft, because all of a sudden Singleton goes over to a team and he's the best situation of all the RBs drafted. He's going to be one of the earlier RBs to be drafted. Obviously, it's not going to change that much when you guys got Love being drafted up in whatever second round he is. But that's the idea with that. Our wide receivers, we got Sun God, which we know is wide receiver 3 for fucking 3 years straight. Egbuka, who I touched on, as in I definitely know he's taking over his role, whatever that is. However, it correlates with, Godwin is to be found out. And we've got Egbuka correlated to Baker. And as you're going to see here, Godwin as well. Our wide receiver 3 is Smitty, which if AJB gets traded, which it almost always feels like these are the fucking situations where it seems like, yeah, he's getting traded and then he stays there. And everyone was like, oh, well, okay, whatever. But if he does get traded, bro, Smitty is dominating. For his ADP right now especially, he'll move up to the second fucking round, as he should. We'll see. I haven't been the biggest fan of Devonta Smith's points throughout his seasons, but if AJB is gone, it's going to be inevitable. You see another Marv for us, like we talked about, another Godwin, and those are just the top 5 receivers on this team, which I like having that in the mix, especially when it's Emeka and Godwin. You get whichever one paired to Baker. Maybe it's not the best correlation, but I definitely enjoy having that. When you got Amon-Ra and when you got Smitty and Marv, you got your receivers, Now we're going to have them playing at the flex. So it might come shy when we've got only 4 teams, potentially wide receiver 1s, if Smitty gets opened up. Pause. But just to finish out this team, we're going to bring in another Trey Tucker, another of both New England's Pop Douglas and Mac Hollins, another of Keon, which we'll see how much we keep doing, and a Turpin, which is like, you don't know much, but he might put up a 11-point game to fill in a week, or maybe even something more explosive. So paired with that, Tyler Warren was beauty, top 5 tight end with Daniel Jones. They're correlated. He was a fucking 4-point shitter without him. So we're going to find out exactly what goes on there, but I definitely think it can be value if the Colts do stay healthy enough and get to start the season strong. Brenton Strange, a tight end who I think late can fill weeks. It might not be anything super special, but I think it pairs, especially when you got your Warren, that you got to believe in for that team to do well anyways. And then you go ahead with your tight end 3, Mark Andrews, who's now the only tight end in Baltimore. And like, maybe he is past his time. However, he'll always have a 14-plus point game, at least once. Often, he might approach a 30, even if it's only one game. But in best ball, it's about week-to-week production. And if you got the room where that's sprinkling, keep soaring. Final team. This was our first draft of the 2026 NFL season, fantasy season, I should say, where we started our QBs with Lamar and then Penix, who's in a QB battle. So we'll find out what that has. Never mad with Lamar, okay? Then our RBs have Gibbs, Hero, and again, learning that it was shy from the first draft. J.K. Dobbins ended up our next. How much does he keep his role versus R.J. Harvey is to be found out. Woody Marks, not a big fan of. Keaton Mitchell. Realistically, this RB room is too shy. Again, we're stupid though, so don't even take my own advice on my own teams when this could be the team that goes and wins, you know? So the reality is, just let it play. See what else we got. This is a 12 wide receiver team, so let's just fly through them. We got Rashi as the one, which we've talked about. Carnell Tate, which is just taking a shot, whether he ends up in an opportunity that he gets to show his production or not. You know, then it'll just be a dump team. Ricky Pierce, who I've liked less and less, only situationally, since bringing in Mike Evans, Captain Kirk. You know, San Francisco just feels like they got all these guys that maybe Pearsall might have a week here or there. However, I'm not drafting him much anymore at that ADP. Then we have Jacoby Myers. We'll see what exactly that whole team looks like when they've got Brian Thomas, Jacoby, and Parker Washington. To be honest, all 3 of them have the shot at being the wide receiver 1 for the team. So we'll find out there. Our 5th receiver being Godwin, we've talked about. Quentin Johnson, we're getting here and there. You know, he finally got to be acclimated. He finally got to have these hard passes from Herbert sticking to his hands, not bouncing off of him. And then you see touchdowns. So when it comes to best ball, it's not about catches, it's about fucking touchdowns and yards. We'll see if that can work well for us, especially as a wide receiver 6. And then you see another conception, Josh Downs, who I'm a good fan of. I think with them losing Pittman, Josh Downs is going to be the more consistent receiver than Alec Pierce. And you can get him at half the ADP or double the rounds, you know. So I think Pierce will have more explosion games than Downs. I would say Downs is still the receiver 1 there, though. And you can get him at pick 142 for 420. So definitely getting our good amount of Downs. You'll see another Trey Tucker just because he's the only receiver there. They might draft somebody. We'll find out. Marvin Mims might have a game here or there. Don't expect much. And then the finish with Mac Hollins and Pop and another Brock and Stowers team. So we got Brock Bowers and Eli Stowers finishing out the tight end room there. Again, you got no clue where Stowers could go. So this team has a potential of just being rips off the NFL draft. And if things line up, it's got the potential of having the best tight end in the class paired with Brock on the Brock Magic season. It's got the potential of Carnell Tate, potentially the best wide receiver, depending on the situation in the class. Lamar with Gibbs, you know, Rashi. Like, it's just got opportunity to pair well. So that is all we got. Again, we got our annual giveaways. If you'd like details on how to enter and win the giveaway, just go comment, enter on this post. We'll DM you details on how to win or enter our giveaway that we do annually, giving back our winnings from each fantasy season to each of y'all. So that's going to be a wrap for today. Those are the 5 teams that we've drafted before the NFL has drafted rookies. Let us know what we're thinking. Let us know where we're most off track so we can get back on track fast. and also let us know the things that you're taking as the most beneficial that we should keep doing. So that's about a wrap. Appreciate everyone. Keep showing love. If you enjoyed this video, go smash a like down below. If you got any notes for us, leave them in the comments. And just subscribe, baby. It's Fantasy Destiny. It's a destiny.